Tom, a couple of different places to go today. So today, just before Thanksgiving, the federal government announced their grocery task force and a new grocery code of conduct to make sure that prices get stabilized from the 5 major Canadian grocers. And it made for a very interesting reaction from Pierre Poilievre. Listen to this.
Canadians didn't want champagne for Thanksgiving. They just want some food. The picture of the turkey during the Conservative years was a big, plump, beautiful bird, whereas right now it's a skimpy, shrimpy little thing that looks like it's been taxed to death. Mr. Speaker, why won't they get off the back of the turkey so that we can have a nice dinner for Thanksgiving?
Okay. A little silly, whatever, but that's what went down. I'm curious what you think about this because, again, I remember when we first talked after they'd met with Francois-Philippe Champagne with the 5 major grocery retailers, and we said don't expect much to happen. Is that still the case? Does this make any difference at all, do you think?
Not a heck of a lot, but by the way, Poilievre skirted, actually he broke a rule of Parliament. You're not allowed to name another member of Parliament. So you might recall back in the spring, Poilievre was having far too much fun talking about it's just inflation. It's just inflation.
Oh, yeah.
So he was told by the Speaker, Rota, at the time, well, you can't say that. You're using his name. So today, what did he use? Well, they didn't ask for champagne. Wah, wah, wah. What's the minister's name? Champagne.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So having far too much fun again.
Nice going,
But
Pierre.
I think that, look, you've got to concede that Poilievre has been on this since day one. He's spotted inflation, cost of living, pocketbook issues as being the number one thing. And guess what? Every poll in the past 6 months has proven that he's completely right because he is polling so far ahead of the Liberals on everything. And last night I was doing a French panel show that I do, and we had Jean-Marc Léger on, the pollster. And he was interesting. He said, look, the stuff on Monday night, he took some of it with a grain of salt, knew that it was a protest vote, knew it was people voting strategically so they could give François Legault a good swift kick in the butt. But what he was saying, too, is he says he has never in his polling life seen the electorate this surly, this upset, this angry about everything. So that's really turning against anybody who happens to be in office, whether it's in Ottawa or in Quebec City, or it turns out in Winnipeg, where the NDP thumped the ruling Conservatives this week. So there really is this trend right now in Canada. People are feeling the pinch, and they're looking for somebody to blame, and this is what's going on.
Can we talk about that for a moment, the significance of having the first Indigenous premier in Canada?
Yeah. So Wab Kinew is a well-known public figure before he went into elected politics. He was on the CBC quite a bit, very strong voice. He's born in Ontario, First Nations community there, has spent most of his life in Manitoba. Strong NDPer, very strong on social justice issues, front and center on healthcare, which was his main theme of the campaign. I have to say that Heather Stephenson, the outgoing premier, really deserves top marks for absolute class that you rarely see in politics. This was a moment of sheer political grace. She went before the microphones, congratulated him wholeheartedly, and said that he was a model for young First Nations kids across the country, and she was glad that he was going to be able to be that model. So, boy, oh boy, it's so rare to see something that classy in politics at all. So, yeah, Wab Kinew, a lot of expectations on his shoulders. He's going to have to work very hard. People are going to be looking at him closely. Now, if you go back, there was a massive commission of inquiry, a federal commission of inquiry into these issues, a couple of decades ago now. And one of the things they pointed to was the demographic shift. I mean, there are that many young people coming into the Indigenous communities across the country. It's going to be a total shift, and the numbers are astonishing. So somebody like Wab Kinew really does become a role model and really helps young people say, I get a chance. It's a little bit what Jagmeet Singh said a couple of days ago when Greg Fergus was heading to the throne of the Speaker of the House of Commons. He said, look, when a kid who's from a racialized background walks down the halls of Parliament, looks at all the white guys and all the paintings on the walls, he doesn't see himself or his community. He doesn't feel part of it. But now you put somebody up there who represents that type of diversity, and it becomes a strong signal. So those two people in just the span of a couple of days really have become emblematic of the diversity of Canada and our deep roots in Indigenous communities, and the fact that a lot of work has to be done, but this is a really positive signal, I think, for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis kids across the country.
Tom, did we not talk a couple of weeks ago about this fact that the federal government, Justin Trudeau, said they were looking to save $1 billion in our national defense budget? Did that not come up? Okay. Yep. I want you to hear this question and his answer when this came up today, Brian.
The government asked the military to find $1 billion in cuts to the defense budget, which the Chief of Defense said will impact the forces. Can you confirm you will go ahead with the $1 billion defense cut?
No, because there are no cuts to our military. Every year, we increase our spending on military. We've increased military expenditures by 70% over these past years and into the future, and we're going to continue to invest billions more.
Tom, first of all, I've never heard him. That may be the first time I actually heard him answer a question with a direct answer. He actually said no.
Unfortunately, it's not true, what he said. And it's an old rhetorical trick. I mean, go back to the debates about cuts in healthcare. You would always get the same answer from the Conservatives in Ottawa and from the Liberals in Quebec City. No, we're not cutting healthcare because if you look at this year's budget compared to last year's budget, it's actually gone up. And that's true in both cases with regard to both defense and health. But what Mr. Trudeau is not saying, and that's why his answer is not true, is that there had been projected increases, and he came back from Vilnius with then Defense Minister Anita Anand and told all of our NATO allies we're getting to 2% of gross domestic product in military spending. Well, we're still the last of the class. We're still at 1.3%. And the projected increases, those are going to be scaled back. That's called a cut. What he's saying is, well, since there's an overall increase, and that there'll still be an overall increase even though we're cutting $1 billion, then I get to stand up in the House of Commons and deny that we're cutting $1 billion. This just in, they're cutting $1 billion.
See, it's hard to follow this stuff until you have it explained to you, because he was pretty definitive about, no, look how much more we're spending. Yeah. So,
but remember Gaétan Barrette being definitive about, we're not cutting healthcare. Yeah. You know, Stephen Harper was saying, no, we're not cutting healthcare. There's more this year than last year. Yeah, but if you're taking into account the structural increase in costs, you're cutting. And that's what Trudeau's doing as well. He's cutting what he said he would add to try to start getting us towards the 2%, and we're still far off the mark. We're one of the weakest players in NATO, and that's what Trudeau won't admit. But he's going to get caught at this sort of game. This is the type of thing that catches up to politicians sooner or later. So he won the 30-second battle. He got to stand up and, satisfy people. Say, well, look, he answered. He said no. Unfortunately, when you dig into it, ain't true.
Okay.
The sound effect. The sound effect was everything in that, Tom. That was great. What do you want to talk about next? Should we talk about the Legault? I feel like I'm done with this story. The flip-flop. Although I did find
it well.
I found it interesting.
About the most recent Nanos poll?
Sure, let's do that instead.
And then it'll give us an opportunity to talk a little bit about the impending tussle between the Libs and the NDP over pharmacare. So the most recent poll, Nick Nano's been at this for a long time, just like Jean-Marc Léger. What's he saying? He's saying that, forget about this. The Liberals would absolutely get trounced, and the Conservatives would form a majority government. Mm-hmm. A couple of little details in here that are worth digging out. So I had always thought that as push came to shove with the Conservatives, you'd probably see a lot of progressives who vote NDP sort of sheepishly drifting back to the Liberals, responding to that siren song, don't split the vote and vote strategically. Boom. NDP up, Liberals down. Boom. This is like people are saying, okay, we want somebody who actually believes in something. And Singh is at 21.2, which is pretty darn good I can tell you firsthand. 21.2 between elections, pretty darn good for the NDP. So Singh's obviously doing something right, which brings us to our other point. What's happening between the Liberals and the NDP? So, they have this deal called a supply and confidence arrangement, which essentially means anything that is a confidence vote, the NDP is going to back the Liberal government. So Trudeau essentially purchased a majority where the voters had not given him a majority because he's buying this deal with the NDP. The first payment was the dental plan for kids. Great idea, by the way, and I completely agree with it. But Trudeau had no intention of doing it, so he was forced into it by the NDP. Check that one out. Now, between now and December, this fall, Mr. Trudeau has a second undertaking that there will be legislation introducing pharmacare across Canada. The NDP is taking a very traditional NDP approach, which is this has to be 100% public, i.e. 100% government run. If you look at the best pharmacare program in Canada, it happens to be here in Quebec. It is by far the most complete, and a little bit like our daycare. When we brought in daycare, there was a big push, this should all be government, this should all be public, and the answer was no. We've already got private daycares, and we're not going to shut them down. We're going to integrate them into the system, and they'll be allowed to operate. So too with pharmacare in Quebec. We allowed the private insurers to continue, and the The backup system was the public system, and it's worked. We actually have a system. So the NDP is letting ideological purity trump the reality here in Quebec. Now, I think that there's a smart way for Trudeau to do this, which is to just say, we're going to do like we did with childcare, because Quebec was so far ahead on childcare, we just cut them a check. And they can do the same thing here. We're just going to give them a check for their pharmacare program, and then we'll go after it slightly differently in the other province. You know, progressive groups like the FTQ Construction Union, they're out there. They're always pushing. This is a big thing of theirs. They want this to be public. That would mean more bureaucrats, more public sector employees, and that's their interest. There's no way to plead that that would actually be more effective or better in the public interest. So I think that when you've got something that actually works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this is going to be an interesting tussle, because the NDP has already said that the first draft that they got from the Liberals, they're going to not accept it.
Right, yeah.
So that means that the Liberals, Mark Holland, their health minister, is going to have to sit down with his bureaucrats and say, okay, what's our way out of this? Because, of course, with numbers like this, you can bet that Trudeau doesn't want an election. And by the way, neither does Singh, because he doesn't have any money to fight one. So this is going to be an interesting tussle. Whether or not the NDP can actually force the Liberals' hand, I think they will, but they better leave Quebec out of it. Otherwise, they're going to get a black eye.